Our fifth named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season has formed on this Monday morning. This is Tropical Storm Erin, which is located about 280 miles west of the Cabo Verde Islands. It did move over the islands this weekend and did cause heavy rainfall. There were some reports of flooding as well. And the winds on this system have been increasing over the last 48 hours. You can see right now, this is our satellite imagery. This is not radar. We don't have radar in this part of the country with it being over the open ocean as it pulls away from the Cabo Verde Islands, but you can see the storm activity, the cloud tops on Erin really ramped up overnight last night. We had some much higher cloud tops, and the Hurricane Center, looking at all of that data, decided that this has likely reached that tropical storm status. So it is now a tropical storm. Winds are 45 miles per hour with some higher gusts. It's currently moving west at 20 miles per hour, which is a pretty good pace for a tropical system. But in the open waters of the main development region in the Atlantic, this is about average for a lot of these systems. So this is the brand new advisory as of 11 o'clock this morning. Let me show you the cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center. What you'll notice is the movement of Erin is going to continue pretty much due west with very little north to south movement over the next couple days. It wobbles a little further south and gets steered a little bit further north. But what you can see in this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer for you, is that the wind speeds are gradually going to continue to increase. So Erin's moving into an environment that's not going to be too hostile. It will allow for some gradual intensification and organization the next couple of days. But then really it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears hits this weekend and it moves into a much more favorable environment. So this is forecast to become our first hurricane of the Atlantic season by Wednesday afternoon or evening, becoming a Category 1 hurricane. And then this is forecast to become our first major hurricane of the season as we get into the Saturday timeframe. That would be north of the Leeward Islands. So by Wednesday becoming a Category 1, by Friday becoming a Category 2 hurricane, and then becoming a Category 3 hurricane by Saturday. Now, believe it or not, this is actually a little bit behind of what's considered our historic average of our first hurricane of the season. That date is today. August 11th is when we typically see our first hurricane of the season, but averages are all the highs and all the lows put together. So it's really not one of the latest ever on record for us to see a hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean basin. What's also interesting is this is going to be earlier, probably, for becoming a hurricane than what's considered the first major hurricane of the season. So our average first major hurricane of the Atlantic season is September 1st. Well, this is forecast right now to become a major hurricane by this weekend, so about a week ahead of schedule. Let me show you spaghetti models. Now, these are looking at where's the center of the low going to go. It doesn't mean that this is where all the impacts are going to be. Tropical systems can span several hundred miles across, and those impacts can spread far outside the center. As of now, Erin is a fairly compact storm, but we do expect it to become slightly larger as we move through time into this weekend. Here's spaghetti models showing a pretty tight consensus. We've got one random outlier, which is not going to happen. We have a good consensus that this will continue moving west and then get steered around the Bermuda High and eventually north of the Leeward Islands, the Windward Islands, the Lesser Antilles, whatever you call these particular island chains over here. We've got that northward progression. So likely not going to be moving in towards the Caribbean, likely not going to be moving right over the Bahamas either, but if it continues on this kind of curvature, this is something we're going to watch for the steering currents along the eastern coast of the U.S. For Bermuda, is it going to go here, here, into here? We're a long way out from that. So this is through Sunday. You can see just moving over the open waters. Eventually, as we head into the weekend, if we have a major hurricane out here, this is going to really churn up some swells along the northern coast of Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands as well. But no significant signs are pointing towards this is headed right towards Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands as well. So that's spaghetti models. Now let's talk about the odds of intensification and really organization. Tropical systems are like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They need things just right to strengthen and become better organized. They need warm ocean waters. They need a lack of dry air. And they also need a lack of wind shear. So let's look at the moisture map first. Here is Erin right here. You notice there is some dry air right out ahead of it. This is kind of that Saharan air layer that comes off the coast of Africa, the Saharan desert, and then a little further south of there is where we end up seeing the tropical waves coming off the coast of Africa. So we have a little bit of that dry air, so that's going to be limiting it on its northwestern side. That's a limiting factor for this thing just exploding in the next couple of days. But eventually it moves into an environment with less of that dry air. We also need tropical systems to not encounter wind shear. Well, that's one of the things working in its favor. We don't have any wind shear. We're in the open waters of the main development region in that tropical area of the Atlantic. We don't have any major wind shear ahead. So that's going to be something that's favorable for development. If we did have wind shear, it could disrupt the growth of this tropical system. This is what kind of a slice of the cake looks like in terms of a normal hurricane. So hurricanes don't need wind shear. Look at how in the middle we have the winds going counterclockwise. It pulls in that latent heat off of the warm waters, and then the winds go outwards on the top. Well, when we introduce wind shear into the equation, we're disrupting that normal wind flow pattern inside the system. So it really kind of shears the systems apart, and it doesn't allow them to strengthen and get into that perfect symmetrical cylindrical shape on satellite and radar imagery. So that's good that we don't have any wind shear in terms of Erin's potential to become a tropical storm that's stronger and eventually a hurricane. And that's exactly what Erin is forecast to do. Now, I'm going to show you something else. This is a look. I'm going to show you two different models. We're looking at, for those of you who are familiar with weather terminology, kind of the vertical velocity. This is our 850 millibar, so it's, you know, about a quarter of the way up our cake in the atmosphere, our layers of our hamburger. And it's just looking at where is the upward motion going to be, not the radar imagery of where's the rain, but where's the upward motion going to be by the weekend. This is the American model, and it shows very close to those spaghetti models, somewhere northeast of the Virgin Islands. Okay, let's look at a European model. This is going to look very similar, traveling westward across the open Atlantic. It has a little more of that curvature north by the end of the week, and then also in a very similar position, it has the center of Erin situated, again, northeast of the Virgin Islands in the Lesser Antilles. So it looks like the models today are in really fairly good agreement of the steering currents in terms of where this system is going to end up going. So we do expect Erin to become our first hurricane of the season. We also expect Erin to become our first major hurricane of the season. But in that process of going from tropical storm to major hurricane, it's not expected to move directly over any bodies of land. Erin is that fifth named storm of the season. All the other storms we've had have been relatively unimpressive. We've had a lot of these fish storms that really haven't impacted land at all. Erin for now, is one of those that is a fish storm, but it doesn't mean it's ultimately going to be a fish storm. And where it's forming and where it's moving is not an uncommon area for us to see that happening in the month of August. Really, we think of the tropical waves coming off the coast of Africa really begin mid-August and ramp up through the months of September. Well, later in the month of August, this map shows you, based on history, where do we see tropical development? Where is the tropical development most likely to occur? And moving westward across the open Atlantic and up here, just north of the Leeward Islands, is a very common area for us to see tropical development. So it is not an unusual place for us to be watching this time of year. We are weeks away from the peak of hurricane season. The peak of hurricane season is September 10th, and the back half of August through September, through the first half of October at least, we see kind of our most active weeks of hurricane season. People often get to August 1st and they think, man, there really hasn't been much of a hurricane season. Well, that's not unusual. When you look at this graphic, this is our tropical timeline, which shows you in the red color, over 100 years, how many tropical storms and hurricanes have we seen in the ocean Atlantic basin per calendar date on the calendar. And you can see here, we see those red colors going up, the bar going up, and it peaks September 10th, and also in yellow, that's the number of just hurricanes, so not tropical storms and hurricanes. And we also see the peak of those hurricanes going up very sharply through the back half of August and through the month of September and the start of October. So we're really just getting started out there. So let me just kind of recap. We've got newly formed Tropical Storm Erin, which is now about 280 miles west of the Cabo Verde Islands. We did have seen some reports from overnight that in some of those islands, they did get a lot of heavy rainfall. It caused some flooding. It caused some street flooding and also flooding in some of the infrastructure, the actual buildings that are out there as well. So that moved over the Cabo Verde Islands. And from here, it is going to be a stormy watch that's open over the open waters of the Atlantic. So not a storm that's directly expected to move over land in the next 5 days. However, as we get into next week, this is a storm we'll be watching for. Where are the steering currents going to take it next week? Is that going to mean impacts for a body of land, or is it just going to churn up the rip currents and the larger swells off the East Coast as it moves eventually closer to the United States? Here's the official cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center. We have that Category 1 hurricane status being met by Wednesday evening, and then between then and the weekend, the environmental conditions become even more favorable for further development. So we do expect Erin to become our first major hurricane of the season. And remember, it only takes one storm to make it a bad year. Even if, you know, this particular storm doesn't directly impact us here in North Georgia, it doesn't mean another one could. So we are forecasting an above average season in the Atlantic. In fact, NOAA last week updated their hurricane outlook for the season. And I'll get to that in 1 second. I do want to show you, though, there's two other areas we're watching. We've got Invest 96L, which we were watching last week, and it had kind of a medium chance of development. At this point, does not look like it's going to develop. And we have yet another little area of thunderstorms, which is off the coast of Nova Scotia. And this also is not expected to develop. It just has a very low chance of tropical development over the next 7 days. Let me get back to that updated hurricane forecast. So NOAA puts out its initial hurricane forecast at the end of May. So it came out about May 22nd this year, and then they update it once we get into the start of August because we're nearing the peak. So we know what's going to be happening with ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. How are the waters of the ocean doing? Are they very hot or are they about average? They look at all those different components, and they're still calling for a 50% chance of an above normal season in the Atlantic with 13 to 18 named storms. Of those, 5 to 9 becoming hurricanes, and of those hurricanes, 2 to 5 reaching major hurricane status. That's a little bit above our average, which is 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 of those hurricanes reaching major hurricane status. So they're saying there's a 50% chance that we're going to see an above normal season in the Atlantic, a 35% chance that it will be a near normal season, so near those averages from 1991 to 2020, and a 15% chance that will be a below normal season. We have yet to reach that hurricane status. That is going to happen by the middle of this week as all eyes are on newly formed Tropical Storm Erin. If you're getting our content on YouTube, thank you for watching us. You can get more weather content like this on 24/7 Weather Impact channel. That's only on 11 Alive Plus. That is free to download on your TV. We have a truly dedicated 24/7 weather channel that has looping radar, tracks of tropical systems, spaghetti models, all of that stuff that you want to know exactly when you want to know it. We have that looping 24/7, along with some interviews with guests that are experts in their fields, tracking all things weather. Thank you so much for joining us. Chesley McNeil is tracking this system on 11 Alive News right now, and then coming up at the top of the hour at 12 o'clock, your local extended weather update right here on Weather Impact 24/7.